Hey, welcome back guys to the channel. And today in this video, I want to talk about something really important with you, okay? And that is, how do you determine who is entitled to an overage or surplus funds or excess proceeds from a tax sale or mortgage foreclosure, okay? There are folks out there that are teaching and training you and saying that you need to confirm who the owner was at the time of the sale. And I agree with them 100%. However, there are some caveats that are not being mentioned that you needed to be aware of. And I'm going to share with you what those are in this video. So this is a very important video, okay? Now, there are other folks that don't even teach you how to confirm who is owed money, that you go and get a list and you find that person on the list and sign them up and get them the money. That is an outdated method. It's not the best course of action, okay? So be aware of that. You do need to be doing some due diligence. If you don't, that's cool. You just can't be mad at yourself when you end up signing up the wrong person that's not even entitled to the money. Or if you find out that, oh, there was a lien that was also entitled and they wipe out the surplus. This applies for both tax and mortgage, okay? So if you don't do your due diligence, what I'm saying is that's fine if you don't, just don't be mad if you lose a deal because of ignorance, okay? Ignorance is not an excuse. There's two ways to learn. You either learn through experience, school of hard knocks, or you invest in information or education and learn from someone who's already gone through the school of hard knocks and already made these stupid mistakes and then teaches you how to avoid them. So with that being said, okay, how do you know who is entitled to a surplus? And how do you know if the person that's on a list, because we can go online, right? So let's do this actually, okay? Let's do a little activity as part of this video. If you go online and you type in excess funds list, see what pops up, okay? All right, cool. George is very common. So we'll pull one of those up. All right, so here's an excess funds list. Not all counties have their lists online. There's another video I shared with you showing you the 4 ways to get lists. You can check that out if you want. I'll also teach you how to get these lists, okay? There's not really anything good here. Oh, no, take that back. Here's a nice one. 63,000, okay? 63,000 in surplus from Paulding County, Georgia. Awesome. Now, you'll notice here that it usually has the name of somebody. This is usually the owner at the time of the sale, but not always. If it's a tax sale, then this is the name of the taxpayer, okay, who was paying the taxes. But taxpayer doesn't necessarily mean it was the owner, okay? And that person can change. And sometimes these lists do not reflect who the owner was at the time of the sale. Now, how do you confirm who owned a property at the time of an auction or foreclosure? Using the county recorder's office or the register of deeds, you can see who was the last recorded owner prior to the auction or foreclosure. Now, here's the important part. It has been said that the owner at the time of the sale is entitled to the surplus funds or the overage. That is not 100% true, okay? That is not true for all states, and it does not apply to both tax sales and mortgage overages, okay? There are caveats to that. So before you even go to the recorder's office to confirm who owned the property, what you really need to do is you need to know the law. You need to know the statute in the state that you are working in that governs both tax sale overages and mortgage foreclosure overages, okay? because they're two different sets of laws in most states. Now, I have done all of that research for you, okay? So I have something called my 50 state guide, which is here, and it lists all of the tax sale, overage statutes, and mortgage statutes in all 50 states, okay? Now, here's an example I'm going to give you where the owner, the last recorded owner at the time of a foreclosure auction, is actually not the person entitled to the surplus. Okay, and I'll prove it to you. Here is an exception to that rule. This is the state of Minnesota. Now, this law governs mortgage overages, okay, or mortgage surpluses. You need to be able to read the laws and understand them, okay? And this is why I also strongly encourage you to only work one state if you're just getting started. Do not try to work multiple states in the beginning, because what will most likely happen is you will become overwhelmed. And if you become overwhelmed, you don't do anything. And if you don't do anything, you don't get any results, and nobody wants that to happen, right? So my recommendation is, if you're just starting in this business, focus on one state, get really good at it, understand it, dominate it, okay? Then when you get good, if you got some deals under your belt, then think about branching out to other places, okay? Now, let's read this statute real quick, okay? So, in all cases not provided in section 580, if after sale of any real estate made as herein prescribed, there remains in the hands of the officer making the sale any surplus money after satisfying the mortgage with interest, taxes paid, and costs of sale, the surplus shall be paid over by such officer on demand to the mortgager, the mortgager's legal representatives, or assigns. Okay. Details matter when it comes to the laws, and specific words matter when it comes to the laws. The way this law is written is it is not the owner of the property at the time of the sale that's entitled to any surplus. It is the mortgager, okay? Why is that important? What is the definition of a mortgager, okay? A mortgager is a person who borrows money, okay? That's what a mortgager is. You know, when you get a mortgage from a lender, you are a mortgager, okay? Mortgager is an individual or company who borrows money to purchase real property. So this is an example of where it's not the owner. Like, you could go and you could see who was the owner at the time of the auction, but that's not what you want to look for in Minnesota. You want to look for who was on the loan that got foreclosed on, because of the way that this law reads, okay? So when you're doing your due diligence, guys, and you're trying to determine and confirm, like if you've got, let's say you've got a list, right? You've got this list. Number one, you need to know the laws, because that will tell you who's entitled to what. And then number two, you go and confirm, okay, is it based on what the law says? Is it the owner entitled to the overage, or is it the mortgager? Okay. And that, depending on what the law says, is going to determine what documents you're going to look for at the recorder's office or the register of deeds. Okay. Because in most real estate transactions, there's usually, you know, there's lots of forms that you sign, right? There's lots of documents, but there's probably two main ones. There is two main ones. The first main one is a deed, okay? Now, a deed, what is a deed? This is very important as well. Let's just, the almighty Google, okay? A deed is a document that conveys ownership, okay? So a deed is a piece of paper that says so-and-so has acquired this property from this person. Okay, there's usually two names on there's usually the grantor, that's the person selling the real estate, and then there's the grantee, that's the person receiving the real estate. Okay, a deed conveys ownership. And so what can happen is in a lot of these, like with mortgage foreclosures, for example, oftentimes if you have a list, the name on the list, like the name of the person getting foreclosed on, is usually the name of the person that's signed for the mortgage or the deed of trust. It's the name of the person that got the debt to purchase the real estate. It doesn't necessarily mean that was the owner of the property at the time of the sale. Okay. And so if you're in a state where the law says that the owner at the time of the sale is entitled to any surplus funds, then what you need to do is you need to find the last recorded deed prior to the tax sale or the foreclosure happening. Okay. Now, if you have a state like Minnesota, you're not going to look for the deed. You're going to look for the second document that I mentioned, which is the debt instrument, okay? Often known as a mortgage, or in many places like my home state, it's known as a deed of trust, okay? That second paper is basically, it's the paper that says who borrowed money to buy the real estate, okay? So like if I sign a mortgage or a deed of trust with Bank of America, it's going to have my name on it, and it's going to say Nick Fulmer owes Bank of America, $500,000, and we'll pay them X amount of money per month for this many months. Okay, that is the debt instrument, and it's known as a mortgage or a deed of trust in most states. Okay, and if you've got a law like you do in Minnesota, that's the document you're going to look for to determine who is entitled to any surplus funds from a mortgage, foreclosure, or tax sale. Okay, so I wanted to clear that up because it's important. These little details matter in this business. They will make and break a case, okay? It's not always the owner that's entitled to the surplus. In most places, yes, it is, okay? But as I mentioned, and as I showed you with the case of Minnesota, it's not always the owner. Sometimes it's the person that signed for the debt that got foreclosed on, okay? You also have to be aware of, this is a great masterclass, but let me just add this caveat in. Guys, I've told you what you need to do, but I also show you exactly how to do this research in section 2 of my training. So if you need a refresher, go watch those videos in section 2 about how to find liens, how to confirm who the owner was, things of that nature. It's in section 2 at school.overagecourse.com. Now, so I've told you what to do, but if you need help, like if you need to be shown how to do it, go there and watch those videos. Now, you also need to be aware of tax sales, and especially states with redemption periods. Those places can be very tricky because some of those states, the way their laws read is they may say something like the surplus belongs to the owner at the time the redemption period ends. And that can screw things up real big. And I learned that the hard way. Let me tell you a brief story to wrap this video up about how I lost it was a 6-figure recovery. Okay. Because I was not aware of this. So we had an individual, a property went to a tax sale. It sold, generated a 6-figure overage. The homeowner was deceased. They had one heir, a son. We found that person, signed them up. Things were looking great. Pass it off to my attorney. Attorney files the claim. County comes back and says, hey, we already gave this money away. We already paid this claim out. There's nothing here for you to claim. And I was like, what the heck? Who did they pay the money to? And what I learned is that our client, the heir, they had executed a deed after the tax sale auction, but before the redemption period ended. And because they had executed that deed to this particular company that reached out to them before us, that company then went and claimed the entire surplus. And it's because of this little loophole, because I wasn't aware of this little teeny detail in the laws. Okay. So again, know the laws where you're working. If you're only working one state, great. You only need to learn 2 sets of laws. The laws that govern tax sale overages, that's going to be your property tax law, and the law that governs mortgage foreclosure overages, which is going to be your foreclosure law. Okay. It's going to be 2 different statutes, but you don't have to know the entire thing. You just need to know the portion, the paragraph, so to speak, like this little paragraph. That's what you need to know. Okay. You can find all of them using my 50 state guide. Okay. That's in section 8 of the course. Go review that if you need to. Once you know the law, that will then help you know what research needs to be done. Do you need to look for the deed or the debt instrument, mortgage, deed of trust? Okay. And that will help you determine if the list that you have is accurate, if the person on there is actually entitled to the money, or maybe it's somebody else that you discover as a result of your research. Okay. And the research is it's not easy. Okay. Especially if you've never done it before, but it's a skill, you'll learn it. Okay. I teach you what you need to look for. And just also understand that not every county is online. Okay. So like, here's an example today. I've got a case in this county in Tennessee, Hamblin County. Never heard of it, but we've got a deal there that we're doing due diligence on. And so I go to their register of deeds and, I see this little paragraph down here. The register is in the process of scanning all deeds and plats into electronic format. So understand this. Not every county has their records online. So what do you do if you cannot find your records from the comfort of your own home on your computer? You either don't work that county, or you have to order a title search, which will probably cost you between $100 and $150. You go in person to the Register of Deeds to conduct your research, or you pay somebody to do your research for you. So there's another kind of tidbit on what happens if you can't conduct your research online, because not all counties are online. Okay. The big ones are, the big metropolitan areas, they are. But that leaves all the rural areas, not all of them are online. So be aware of that as well. The research part can be tricky in this business, can throw a lot of people off. And if you don't do your research, that can also bite you in the end. Because like I mentioned, you either sign somebody up that was not the right person, or you are unaware of liens that could wipe out the surplus. Okay. In some states, it's very difficult to do the research. And sometimes we just have to take the risk of being like, you know what? We don't have access to the records, and we're not going to, and sometimes the trustees won't even tell you, if there's liens or not, unless you ordered a title search, or if you sign the homeowner up and then submit what's called a third-party authorization form. Then you can conduct your research. But then, so the process flips in those particular states. Instead of doing your research first, you have to contact the person, sign them up, and then do your research. Those are difficult areas to work. Okay. An example of that would be Texas. So anyway, I hope I haven't rambled on too much, but I hope this was valuable for you. Hope you learned something. Again, I agree with those who say that you need to conduct research, confirm the owner or confirm who, took out the debt. But I wanted to make sure that it's clear that the last recorded owner is not always the person entitled to the surplus. And so it's very important that you know the laws in the places that you're working. Okay. All right. Let me know if you have questions. I hope this was helpful, beneficial for you, and I'll see you in the next video. Appreciate you guys. And if you're brand new or you're looking to get into this business, check out overagesyndicate.com. We've got a free training there. If you want to learn the process of how I do these deals and how all my successful students do these deals, check out our course at school.overagecourse.com. Thanks so much.